Welcome everyone to another episode of Marriage Matters.
Hi everybody.
I am Glenn Coleman. For those of you who are watching for the very first time, my name is Glenn Coleman, and this is my lovely wife,
Tanya Coleman.
And we're the Colemans.
That's who we are.
And this show is Marriage Matters. And this is just a show where we talk about all things relationships, marriage, family, kids, the whole 9 yards, right?
All of the things.
Yeah. So thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. We always say this because it's so true. We're so grateful for the overwhelming response that we're getting from you guys. You know, one of the greatest things, we have a friend, and actually she was Tanya's friend growing up, but she became my friend. But she texted Tanya the other day, and she had watched one of the podcasts, and it just really helped her through some things that her and her husband were, doing or not doing in their marriage. And so she sends the podcast to her husband, and she said before she knew he had watched 2 more of the podcast, and how much it impacted him. And those stories, just really pull at my heart. Absolutely. And I'm just, again, so grateful. So I'm going to go ahead and get right into today's topic, and we're going to be talking about what's really the problem.
Wow.
What's really the problem?
What's really the problem?
What is it?
Let's talk about it.
Okay, let's do that. So there's a guy that I follow by the name of Quest Green. Shout out to Quest Green. Quest. He hosts a podcast called Marriage Ain't for Suckers. And that's how it's spelled, suckers. Marriage Ain't for Suckers. And he's also the director for the ETA, Eric Thomas Associates, their marriage, the marriage portion of their company.
Their branch.
Yeah, marriage branch. So anyway, but Quest always says, and I've stole this from Quest, so I'm going to go ahead and say it, but he always says that, your spouse is not the problem. You're not the problem. The problem is the problem. And that you and your spouse should come together and work on the problem. And fix the problem and stop trying to fix each other. And I think that happens a lot of times in our marriage. And here's what I'm finding, in marriage a lot is that the reason why we keep visiting the same issues or we keep having the same conflict, the same disagreement, the same argument, whatever you want to call it, is because we're really not getting to the root of the issue or the root of the problem, or what the problem really is.
Yeah, we're not getting to the depth of it.
Yeah,
a lot of surface things come up, and so that's what we deal with in the moment. It's almost like putting out fires all the time. Yeah, but we haven't done the work to get to the root of the issue.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. So it's kind of like we're running around putting out fires instead of going to what's causing the fires. Right. It's kind of like having bad wiring in a house. Ooh, that's a really good analogy. So you have bad wiring in your house, and instead of calling in an electrician to come in and fix the source, we're just satisfied with we just keep buying fire extinguishers. And we're putting out the fires. And I know that sounds absurd when it comes to when you put it in that aspect as far as, to a house. But that's what's going on a lot of times in our relationships. And, when you think back, I know, well, I'll just say the reason why you wouldn't just go and hire an electrician is because, number one, is the cost associated with that. I remember when we had first moved into the house that we were in, I didn't notice, and we just didn't pay attention. Well, there wasn't a doorbell. There was no doorbell, and I didn't find out until the alarm company was coming out to install the alarm, and I told them, I wanted the Ring doorbell, and they're like, well, you don't have a doorbell. There's no electricity going to that spot, where the doorbell would be. I'm like, oh man. So I called an electrician, and I'm like, hey, I need you to come, and I want to run a wire you know, and he's like, well, because your home is brick and all this other stuff, it's going to cost this much money to install the doorbell. I was like, what? You know, when he told me the amount, I was like, what? So I was like, all right, never mind. I'll just do it myself.
Right.
And that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
I did it though.
You did.
I had a little
job.
snafu in doing it.
Yeah, just a little one.
Yeah, I kind of stepped through the ceiling and made a hole in the ceiling.
Yeah.
But that's a whole nother. But still, though, we can even use that. You know, a lot of times we do that in our relationships when we find out what it's gonna, or we don't want to do the work that it costs to get to the root, because it does cost. It may cost you some physical money.
Right.
You know, you may have to go to therapy, or you know, you it costs time. You know, but again, even with me doing that, repair myself on the house with the doorbell.
Right.
Not only did I may have saved some money, I definitely didn't save time, because it took me probably twice as long as a licensed electrician would have done.
Right.
So I didn't save any time. It may have saved me a little money, but it really didn't, because then I had to pay to get the hole fixed in the ceiling. Right. So, you know, I should have just paid the money up front and let the professional come in and do it, or took the time to fix it the right way. But again, going back to our relationships, that's what we do in relationships. A lot of times we take the shortcut. And many times your disagreements and your conflicts or your arguments, you may be arguing about, you know, that he didn't take the trash out again. But a lot of times that's just the surface. It's really not about the trash.
Right. It's about so many other little things that seem very minor, that add up sometimes. Sometimes it's about, you know, some frustrations that may be even deeper than the little bitty things that happen throughout, you know, just everyday life. But not dealing with stuff, and we say that all the time, that we can't just sweep things under the rug in marriage. We have to deal with whatever the issue is up front.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes we just want to skirt around things because we're uncomfortable with having real conversations. And we're uncomfortable with bringing issues to the table because, you know, we don't want to hurt, we don't want to offend, we don't want to cause another argument or what have you. But when we don't do that, then things are just sitting there, and someone is constantly being disappointed or hurt or offended, and that is building up on the inside of them.
And I know a lot of times I think what happens, you know, and even for us, you know, and it's like, because you just don't want to have to deal with that right now. And a lot of times what happens, and this, you know, we tell couples this all the time, you know, you don't want to get into a situation where you're having just a big blow up. So, you know, we do have what we call strife breaks.
Sure.
Where, you know, you take some time to
kind of go almost like in your separate corners and diffuse.
To diffuse and think about it. And even sometimes it may be even a good idea just to, you know, not, you know, and the Bible does say, you know, don't let the sun go down on your wrath. You know, and a lot of people take that to mean, well, we can't go to bed until we've agreed. Well, sometimes it's a good thing to sleep on it and just let it, you know, get a good night's rest and wake up and have the conversation the next morning. Right. But the point I'm getting to is that sometimes what happens is we say, let's table this and we'll come back to it later, but we never come back to it. Right. And then things go back to normal. And then it's like we don't even ever discuss it because we're now back in our flow. And then a week later, the same thing comes up or something else comes up. So now you got the first thing that you got upset about that you didn't talk about. Then you got the second thing that, you know, you keep doing this and you keep building these things. And I was listening to one podcast, and the therapist, she was talking about how it's like kind of like having a backpack, right? And you just keep putting it, and pretty soon you're just weighed down, right? And then that's when the breakdown happens or whatever, and you just really get yourself into a situation as a couple that you don't want to be in. Right.
I was going to say, you know, and when that happens, I'm sorry, sweetie. When that happens, I'll just say offended party, the person who has been offended or disappointed or what have you, they're still typically they're still thinking about that thing, whatever it is. They're still thinking about it. They're still meditating on it. Whereas the other person, and we'll just use, for example, the offender, or the person that caused the harm or the hurt, whether they know it or not, typically is kind of moving on because they haven't been offended by it, and so now we're going in two different directions on this issue, and because we haven't discussed it, the offended party typically, their emotions go really negative on the issue. Then those emotions begin to play out in how they're communicating and talking to their husband or wife. So it just builds up, and over time, that's when that explosion, so to speak, happens. So it's really important that we always talk about talking about communicating about everything all the time, no matter what it is. We have to be open with one another with what's going on. And of course, there's a time and place. You have to find, the right time to say, hey, babe, if something came up, there's an issue that we need to discuss, the other day when this happened, this is how that made me feel. Or when you said this, when you did this, this is how that made me feel. I don't feel good about it still, and I feel like we need to talk about it,
Yeah, so, going back to what really is the problem. So one of the things that I've really started doing is really examining the way, really getting in tune with my emotions. And when I say that, I don't, most people automatically think that means, you're crying all the time or whatever. But, that may be part of it, but it's not really what I'm saying. So Melissa Dunwa, who of the Kitchen Table out of Lafayette, I'm doing a certification class with them. But she said something that she was talking about just emotions, and she said the root word to emotions is motions, and that your emotions should cause you to move, or will cause you to move in a direction, whether those are negative or positive. And so we have to learn how to allow our emotion to move us in the right directions. And so one of the things that I really I'm learning to do is when I do get emotional, and whether that emotion is, happy, sad, mad, afraid, whatever it is, whatever that emotion, whatever that feeling is to, especially when it's in the negative.
Sure.
In other words, especially when I'm afraid or I'm fearful or I'm upset or I am whatever. You know what I'm saying? In
just
the
not
negative.
in a good space.
Right.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to start doing is to ask myself the question, why am I feeling this way?
Yeah, that's an important question.
What's causing me to feel this way? And what that does for me is it kind of really slows things down. And again, it's helping me to realize that a lot of times my issue is really not with Tanya. That I'm not upset. It's really not what she's doing, but it's something that's deep seated, in me. So, an example is this was like last week. We had an event coming up, and Tanya wanted to buy, new outfits. She wanted to buy I thought it was a dress, but it really wasn't a dress. It was something else. And
it was a nice top, y'all.
So, but anyway, she had picked something out for me to wear, and and I said okay. But then there were some other things that we had coming up that I knew we were wanting to do, and so I told her, I said, I don't want to do both. I said we need to choose one or the other because I don't want to spend that much money all at one time. And I could tell she was a little like maybe disappointed.
Yeah.
But she's like, okay, well,
I understood what you were saying.
But I kind of took a step back, and actually it was after listening. If you guys don't know this by now, I'm a podcast junkie. I listen to podcasts all day long at work. And I just love to consume just especially about marriage, But I was listening to another podcast, and the guy he said something that triggered something in me, and I was like, you know what? I said, what was really going on? Why am I feeling this way about, Tanya? Well, and initially I was like, we have, we're planning, we have a budget or whatever, and I don't understand, and I didn't say this, but this is my process. Mm-hmm. Like, why, it's like, why does she always want to, spend the money? Why does she always want to spend the money? Mm-hmm. And which in reality she doesn't. I mean, she's not, she's not like in the mall, which we don't really have a mall, but you know what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. She's not out, going shopping every week, and but it was just at that moment, it was just like, to me, there was a lot. It's like, okay, why does she just have to spend the money? And so I took a step back and I really started looking at that, and I'm like, okay, why am I feeling this way about this? And it's like, okay, we had the money, and it wasn't like you buying those things were going to totally just
put us in finances.
Yeah. So I really started, and for me, it went back to my family of origin. It went back, and because my dad, God rest his soul, I love him, but he used to always tell me, make sure you got to save, son. Make sure you save. And, he used to always tell me that save and, don't spend money you don't have, and he preached that to me a lot.
Which is good stuff.
Which is good, but I think, that puts something into me, or over these years, I interpret that as don't spend money.
Period.
Period. And I mean, like
I can see that. Being married to you for, 18 years, I definitely see that.
Yeah. And I don't like to spend money.
You don't.
I don't like spending money. And so I thought that the problem was with you. And I'm like, why does she, and I remember thinking this, like, why does she have to spend money? And it's like, well, everybody, it's like, you have to spend money. Right. If we don't spend money, we don't have nothing to eat. We won't have to. But that was my thought process. Like, why does she have to always spend money? But again, it was and even like I said, I don't even think my dad meant it. That never, he didn't say never spend money.
Because I know how you grew up. Y'all spent money.
Yeah, I mean, we were not like,
I'm not saying, I'm just saying, like, when you talk about, the family vacations, the going out to eat every weekend, the type of clothing you wore growing up. It wasn't like he had this iron fist when it came to money, know.
But I guess those words just rung so true to me, and even to the point now that, we're really trying to move into investing and getting over this, another person I follow, listen to a lot podcast is Jamal King. And, he talks about the middle class mentality. And I mean, nothing wrong with being in the middle class, but he was just saying how, that's what we're taught. Work hard, save your money,
right,
and retire one day. But he was just saying, and it's like when you're saving money, your money's not working for you. Right. So even then, I'm having issues. We were investing in the real estate program, and I had the hardest time. I had the money, but it's like I was like, that's a lot of money. And I couldn't spend it because I'm like, man, I should be saving this. But if I take that money and put it in a savings account,
it's gonna 1%, 1.5 maybe.
Yeah, if that. But where I could take that money and invest it, and it would So again, what I'm saying is, I said all this to say this. I thought that I had a problem with my wife and the way she was spending money, and the problem really was the way I thought about money.
And I think...
And let me say one more thing. And I thought that I was pretty progressive when it came to how I managed my money. I was I was okay with. I thought because I investing in stocks. I thought that I was okay, but when I really looked at, there was a deep seated stronghold, if you want to call it that. I'm trying to think of another word. But there was this ideal that I had in me that money is to be saved. And I remember you had made the comment about we work hard, we should enjoy. And I'm like, well, we do. I enjoy saving it. I enjoy saving it. Yeah. So again, it's just going back and doing. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Doing that work, doing the work to and just examining things. Right. Go ahead and say what you were going to say.
No, I was going to say, for me, because I definitely want to stick in our budget and the plan that we have. But I do know that there are times where spending money will be necessary. Right. Not that we had to have something particularly new for the event, but it would have been nice to have. Yeah. But when you brought the point forth, I was like, okay, well, that's fine. I understand it. We'll just, pull out something that we already have in the closet, and it was fine. When it came to the real estate investing thing, though, I'm thinking the purpose of investing this money is to make more money. Mm-hmm. This is one of the areas that, we've discussed that we're going to move forward in order to bring more income into the house and eventually be able to really shift, our lifestyle. Mm-hmm. So that was, that is my big push on doing that, is that could change a lot for the family, and I feel like it's really important.
Yeah. It is. It is. And, I don't want to really get into the whole investing thing, but I guess the point for me was, what really was the problem? Right. And I think that's how we really need to start addressing things in our relationship. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, how they used to say, when you point the finger, you got three fingers. Oh, three. 3 fingers and a thumb. Well, I guess I don't point like this. That's a gun. I point like this, right? So, and I know that's kind of silly, but it's true. You can't, a lot of times when we think it's our spouse's fault, and we say things like, if she would just support me more, or if she would just, or if he would stop doing this, or if he would do this, or if he, and we start the blame game. Right. And we think that our spouse is the problem, but like we started off with, like my boy Quest says, and by the way, I don't know Quest Green. I'd like to meet him one day, but I feel like I know him because I've heard so many of his podcasts. But anyway, that's not the problem. Right. You got to figure out where the problem is. And for me, with that money thing, I found out that the problem was in me. And like I said, the crazy part is I thought that I had a pretty good relationship with money. Mm-hmm. I thought that, I was doing, when it came to money, that I had a pretty good grasp on, and I guess I did. In other words, I knew the knowledge, I knew what we needed to do, but it was just, like I said, it was just something, it's
like a barrier, like you couldn't move that was in me,
that was placed there. Mm-hmm. Like I said, it was the words of my father that did it. And like I said, he didn't even mean it that way. Right. But it was the way that I took it and the way I interpreted it that formed I'm trying to think of a better word than stronghold, but.
Well, I think ideal was a good word. Yeah.
He's and so, that's why it's so important for us to really, like I said earlier, when you feel a certain way about something, if you and your wife, if something that your spouse is doing or your significant other is doing, and it really kind of, rubs you the wrong way, take some time and ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? Mm-hmm. What is that feeling about? I'll just use, the one with my kids, I talked about this, I taught at our church a couple of weeks ago, and I was telling them, it just dawned on me, why do I get so upset with my kids when they don't listen to me? Why am I the one getting so upset? Mm-hmm. What's that about? I mean, after all, I'm the parent. Right. and I'm the one with the control or the power in this, in the, you know, in the dynamics, you know, and it's just really, I'm still kind of tracing that, but you know, it's like I that really bothers me, you know, and I'm the one who has control in that situation. Does that make sense? You know, so again, just really paying attention, and I'm encouraging you just to really tune in to those emotions. Don't ignore them. You know, I always say that emotions are flags. They're indicators as to, you know, where you're at, and even pay attention to the happy emotions. You know what I mean, or the good. I guess I don't know if we should say good or bad, but the things that make you happy. Pay attention to those. Why am I so happy right now? What's going on in my life right now that's giving me this feeling that's bringing me joy, because that's the thing. Those are the things that I want to produce more of.
That's exactly right.
In my life, you know, and the things that are not bringing that are bringing me frustration, you know, I want to either stop doing those things, or find out, because some of them, you know, you can't, like with the money thing, I can't stop you from spending the money, so I need to figure out what is that, why do I feel that way about this situation.
Right. That's good. I'm glad that you did some self-assessment to get to the root of, you know, what was happening, you know, and I know now it's a process of undoing that barrier, or, you know, that ideal, and resetting, you know.
Yeah. And the other thing that it was, I think some of it is I want to make sure that making sure that I am a good provider.
Sure.
You know, and what would happen if, you know, we take this risk and it doesn't work out? You know, what would that do for the family? Or, you know, how it would kind of, and that just kind of really played on, I think it played on that side of me, the provider side. And I was like, you know, I got to make sure that my family is okay and make sure that my family is secure. But again, I don't think that the investment we were making, again, it wasn't something that was going to totally just ruin us financially. And again, when I thought about that, it went back to several years, well, more than several years ago. But, you know, there was a time in our life where we were, you know, we made a step of faith, and things didn't work out the way we thought that they would, and we wound up in a pretty bad situation. So that, I think I'm still doing the work to undo all of that, because I never ever want us to be back in that place again as a family.
Absolutely.
You know, so I think it's just all of those things, you know, that was causing me to not want to move forward. And so now I'm in the process of doing the work that it takes, and I guess for me, that work is just really reassuring myself and reshaping the way I think about money, and that comes through re-educating myself, becoming more knowledgeable about investing, and I think I've been doing that, especially with the real estate investing. I've been just listening to a lot of podcasts and doing a lot of reading and research on that. And so that's what I'm doing from my end. So from a spouse, how do you think you can help give them something that you could do to help support your spouse in doing the work, or working through, or breaking through their ideals? And there's another word I'm trying to think of. I just can't think of it right now, man.
Well, first of all, you know, definitely prayer. Praying for your spouse, praying together. Any information as it relates to whatever the issue is. You know, for us, we're working through some ideals about finances, sharing any information that I come across with you, you know, and just helping you talk through, you know, doing check-ins, you know, how's this going? Have you found anything new? Have you learned anything new? When the subject comes up again, because while they're working through their process, you're gonna have another opportunity to revisit that same problem when it comes up again. Remind them, hey, babe, we talked about this last month. Remember, you were working through, your challenge with how you spend or invest money, your time, what have you, eating habits, whatever it is, just remind them, him or her, that, you're working on some new resolves. Reflect back on what you've learned or what you've done in this span of time.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing you want to do is make sure that you're speaking to your spouse where they are going. In other words, letting them know that, hey, you are a great provider.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Or whatever.
The encouraging support,
right?
Not right. Condemning or what have you.
Right.
Yeah.
And not trying to pull them back. And I'm trying to think of another great example, but not trying to pull them back into where they're trying to be delivered from or moved from, and speaking to them in that future.
Right.
The Bible talks about calling those things that be not as though they were, right? Or so you speaking, and just encouraging them and complimenting them when you see them doing the work, complimenting them and encouraging them in those areas, So what's really the problem? Yeah. What's really the problem? Is it really about the disagreement that you're having? Right. I mean, is that argument really about what you're arguing about? So take some time, and I'll say this, especially if you find yourself arguing or disagreeing about the same things over and over and over again. It's like a cycle of disagreement that's going on. Step back from that and really look at yourself and say, why is this upsetting me this much? And a lot of times the things that are, well, I'm not going to say that. Step back and really examine why you're feeling that way.
Sure.
And identify what's really going on. What's really the problem? What's really the problem?
The problem is the problem.
The problem is the problem. A lot of your spouse is not the problem.
Yep.
The problem is the problem.
The problem is the problem.
So spend your time fixing the problem and stop trying to fix your spouse. Amen. And you'll be amazed at when you change how much they will change.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not a true statement, but
your perspective.
When you change, your perspective changes. Thank you. Yeah, and you'll see the thing from a whole different angle. All right, so that's all we got for you today. We want to thank you for joining us for another episode of Marriage Matters. And so this is Glenn and Tanya Coleman saying,
Your marriage matters.
We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.